It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Weather around the world is completely unraveling. What core factor in this equation continues to be covered up by the criminal cabals masquerading as legitimate governments? We'll get to that. But about the weather, drought to deluge and back scenarios are now the norm. Baseball and softball size hail, now the norm. Snowless in the Andes, diminishing snow everywhere except the chemical ice nucleation engineered winter target zones. Elsewhere in South America, record heat, record drought, and record deluge. On the other side of the world, in places like Tasmania, the same, and Australia. Mexico hit 113 degrees Fahrenheit in March. Wonder what July and August will be like there. They're already almost out of water. Record heat in Phoenix, 99 degrees officially, unofficially 100 or more. And many other locations in the Southwest also record heat, including the Northwest. And the record heat comes in between the chemical ice nucleation flash freeze cool downs. Record March heat in the Caribbean, hottest nights ever recorded there for March. Out of control fires in South Carolina, the state that continues to be brutalized. In fact, no state in the Union is being overlooked, are they? All subject to ongoing weather warfare operations. Record firestorms in South Korea. What have they done to anger the controllers that be? Record heat in China, Africa, Australia, the Middle East, and again America. Many records being broken by 10 full degrees or more. If that doesn't alarm you, it certainly should. Between the record warm-up rebounds, there are climate engineering chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding temporary toxic cool downs, often with odd-shaped frozen material falling from the sky. Anything from what looks like tufts of cotton, grains of rice, little styrofoam pellets, all various forms of chemical ice nucleating elements. Search Lake Michigan ice balls. Take a look at those pictures. Or search the engineering winter section on geoengineeringwatch.org and take a look at all the data and pictures. You'll be shocked to the core. And this chemically nucleated material now often regularly includes baseball and softball size hail, increasingly commencing at temperatures far above freezing. Again, search and review the engineering winter section, geoengineeringwatch.org. Manipulated extreme surface wind flows are now also a core component of the climate engineering chemical cool-down processes, patented processes, only denied by the unresearched and the ideologically challenged. The extreme surface winds enhance the endothermic reacting properties of these climate engineering elements. While ever more outrageous scripted political theater is being utilized to distract and divide populations till the last possible moment, orchestrated conflict, carnage, and climate engineering chaos are wreaking havoc around the world. Buckle up. Let's get started. So many bad news breaking headlines to cover in this broadcast. First, from MSN. Scientists sound the alarm as new study predicts dire consequences of human activity. The power to wipe out entire landscapes. End of headline. In this report, did the so-called scientists muster up the courage to mention the most destructive human activity of all? Global climate disruption operations that are raging in our skies day after day, painfully obvious to any that aren't completely asleep at the wheel? You already know the answer. Of course, the so-called scientists didn't say a word. They know how long their leash is. So let's all just ride the Titanic to the bottom of the abyss, eyes wide shut. And about the title of humans having the power to wipe out entire landscapes, as catastrophic as that sounds, the untainted truth is unthinkably worse. Our species wields the power to wipe out the entire planet many, many times over, and that is exactly the course we're collectively on. Near-term self-annihilation. No nuclear cataclysm needed, no rogue asteroid needed. And about that trajectory, it's not speculation, theory, or conjecture. It's a statistical certainty, again, if we remain on the current course. And about the time frames on the current trajectory, not centuries, not decades, collapse is already kicking in the front door now. Though the list of human assaults on the planet is endless, and all are part of the scenario we now face, climate engineering, aka weather warfare, is at the top of the heap. On that note, a new headline that is a glaring red flag of the controllers trying to convince us that climate engineering is actually good for us, or at least, according to them, the lesser of two evils. From CipherNews.com, Geoengineering quantified. Heat is deadlier than air pollution. From the report, a recent peer-reviewed article in the preeminent scientific journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences quantified the risks and finds more people would die because of the heat from unabated climate change than would die from any additional pollution caused by deploying this solar geoengineering technology. Really? Let's ponder that conclusion from the National Academy of Sciences, aka the power structure paid for kind. So, after 3/4 of a century of ongoing and accelerating geoengineering weather warfare operations, the human race and all life on Earth is circling the drain now. Yet the Matrix-owned experts would have us believe that filling our skies full of toxic jet-sprayed heavy metal and polymer aerosol filth will, in the end, save us all from ourselves, instead of ensuring our common demise. Do you believe them? Bottom line, if we're to buy any bonus time on planet Earth, the climate engineering insanity must be fully exposed and halted, and that effort will take all of us. If we can simply push this issue to the full light of day, a shockwave will ensue around the world. Populations would finally be forced to face the fact that their governments have done this to them without their knowledge or consent. The liability issues are incalculable. That's why governments are doing everything they can to hide the atrocities in our sky until the last possible moment. Pressing on from Yahoo News, weather whiplash, record heat and severe weather possible this week. From ABC News Minnesota, from 70s to slush, weather whiplash in store this week. And they use that term all the time now. Did you hear that 15 or 20 years ago? No. You hear it now because climate engineering is the core factor in the weather whiplash scenarios. This ABC report continues with this. Some along the I-90 corridor could see the 80s as a cold front arrives in the evening. Yeah, that's normal. Temperatures in the 80s to snow, the chemically nucleated kind, and no one asks any questions. Move along. Nothing to see here. From AccuWeather, at least 100 million at risk for severe weather from Saturday to Monday. From that report, severe thunderstorms will jolt dozens of states from late this week through early next week, including the risk of destructive winds and tornadoes. Saturday is forecast to be the first of the major days of severe weather in the unfolding pattern. Again, this reminder, chemical ice nucleation cloud seeding created so-called cold fronts are colliding with warm flows of air and moisture, generally from the record warm Gulf. The result, unstable atmospheric conditions and cyclonic rotations, aka tornadoes. Another from Yahoo News. Experts warn of severe consequences after significant shift in snowpack levels. We are not keeping up with what we need. That's the end of the headline. The report then states, after a promising start, the snowpack in the northern Sierra, California dropped dramatically during the middle of winter. Question, why? This is why. The climate engineers are manipulating and migrating moisture flows from the west, scattering it over the widest possible surface area, sometimes a dozen states or more, by the use of seeding excessive condensation nuclei and frequency transmissions, all patented processes. Literally, you can have almost half the United States, the western half, covered with scattered, often featureless, precipitationless skies, scattered cloud canopy. Only, quote, filtered sunlight gets through. Welcome to solar radiation management operations. The result, greatly diminished precipitation in some regions, excessive precipitation in others, extreme weather and temperature whiplash. On that note, from the AccuWeather climate engineering cover-up actors, temperature war brewing for northeastern U.S. this weekend as summer and winter do battle. End headline from that report. Warm and cold air will go head to head in the Northeast this weekend, with temperatures climbing into the 80s Fahrenheit in some areas, while other locations hover in the 30s and 40s. Which side of the fence will you be on? Question mark. That's all from the report. Let's stop there. What absolute tyranny from the so-called experts at power structure controlled climate engineering cover-up institutions like AccuWeather. Their job is to convince populations that it's normal to have temperatures in the 80s on one side of a so-called winter storm and various forms of frozen material falling from the sky on the other side of the so-called winter storm, even with temperatures well above freezing. Though if chemical ice nucleation operations are carried out for an extended period, the surface temperatures can drop precipitously. The weather makers are increasingly desperate. We can't know just how much more toxic the chemical nucleated precipitation has become. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it broadcast. And with each passing day, that's becoming a literal statement. Brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Reaching a critical mass of awareness is the only way forward in this fight. We absolutely must reach a critical mass of awareness. Starting a conversation on climate engineering that leads people to a credible source of data is key. It's not productive to just repost and share anything from anyone that has anything to say about this subject, however baseless and lacking credibility it may be. Credible source of data. That's key. That's what gains traction in this battle. Geoengineeringwatch.org will continue all of our efforts to be the go-to source on covert climate engineering operations. A conversation on climate engineering can easily be started with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They're available on our homepage. Are extremely high quality, full color printed materials, excellent key to the door, and we pass those on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We are working this battle 7 days a week, my entire family. This is all we do for as long as we can remember. It's intolerable for me to live on a planet with this going on in our skies, destroying what's left of this former miracle planet that we inhabit. Please help us to sound the alarm. Moving on. What's being scheduled for hurricanes? Also from so-called AccuWeather. Dynamic hurricane season predicted for Atlantic in 2025. From that report, the Atlantic hurricane season starts on June 1st and is poised to be a turbulent year, with AccuWeather predicting 13 to 18 storms and warning of hurricanes that can rapidly strengthen. That's rapid intensification, which is mostly what we see now, never existed in the past, leading up to landfall. And why is that? Why is the rapid intensification almost always just prior to landfall? Because that's when the ground-based network of frequency transmission facilities can then pick up the manipulation of that storm. And they don't want it too strong too soon, because then it can't be steered as easily. These are patented processes. Please search geoengineeringwatch.org hurricanes. Look at all our reports that we captured in real time of cyclones being steered with patented processes of frequency transmissions. It's inarguable. The interaction of these transmissions and the behavior of those storms is absolutely beyond dispute. They are being manipulated. We can speculate as to the motives, the agendas, the objectives. Bottom line, they are being steered. If all the data is examined, that conclusion is inarguable. From the AccuWeather report, this last statement, one of the biggest factors for tropical development in 2025 is the abundance of warm water available to fuel storms. Yes, that's true. The planet is very capable of spawning these storms, much more so than ever before. But let's correct that last statement. Not just warm ocean water, but in fact, record-shattering warm oceans, so warm that reefs all over the globe are dying or are already dead. And kelp forests, a far larger network of underwater ecosystems, are completely imploding, almost gone already, about 95% gone. an extremely painful scenario for me, as I have spent so many years of my life diving in these mystical underwater forests, in solitude, in awe of their absolute miraculousness, now gone. Anyway, about the hurricanes, remember and consider that the U.S. military has been learning how to manipulate them since Project Cirrus, all the way back in 1947. How far do you think they've advanced their skills since that time? About the criminal cover-up of climate engineering, this new headline from CNN News. State lawmakers are looking to ban non-existent, quote, chemtrails. It could have real-life side effects. That's the end of the headline. That's from Ramisha Maroof and Brandon Miller. That's a CNN meteorologist. Perhaps sending a peaceful and professional email to Mr. Maroof and Brandon Miller with a link to the geoengineeringwatch.org documentary, The Dimming, would be appropriate. Ask them to try and explain away the proof presented in The Dimming, and to make them accountable, openly CC as many other awake and aware activists and individuals as you can, so that Mr. Maroof and Mr. Miller know that there are a great many awaiting their response. From the CNN Climate Engineering Cover-Up Report, this: an unsubstantiated conspiracy theory that claims the U.S. government is controlling the weather or its citizens by spraying dangerous, quote, chemtrails from airplanes has now made its way into several state legislatures where it could get manifested into real-life laws. Let's stop there. Not several states. As of this broadcast, 31 states and counting. Geoengineeringwatch.org is working with many of the representatives from these states, supplying them our printed materials as well. More from CNN. It's an example of how unproven and off-the-wall theories. Stop and think about that. The entire global climate science community is talking about climate engineering, describing exactly what we see in our skies with exactly the consequences we are experiencing and the exact kind of fallout that are showing up in lab tests everywhere, including destroyed ozone layer, disrupted hydrological cycle, everything. And yet CNN and their so-called reporters call this off-the-wall theories. They continue, are bubbling into mainstream discourses under the Trump administration. I'll elaborate on that. That is certainly a political statement that doesn't belong in this report because it's all administrations going back decades. They say many of which sow distrust in the government, the theories they're speaking about. This effort, they say, in particular, could prevent actual scientists and engineers from slowing the breakneck pace of global warming, which is inflicting a devastating toll on Americans in the form of extreme weather. Whoa, wait, stop. Again first, just under the Trump administration, as I stated, no. Every administration going back decades. And about the distrusting the government part, who rationally wouldn't distrust the government at this point? So let's ponder that previous sentence again. Quote, the chemtrail conspiracy theories could prevent actual scientists and engineers from slowing the breakneck pace of global warming, which is inflicting a devastating toll on Americans in the form of extreme weather. Climate engineering, aka weather warfare, is exacting an unimaginable toll on everything, including all Americans, and to omit that from this equation is absolutely criminal. How are these authors for this CNN report not criminal accomplices to the climate engineering crimes? The rule of law says that they are. So these authors want us to believe that climate engineering operations will slow the warming down. How exactly? With so-called solar radiation management operations, which the CNN report again denies, though these operations are and have been raging in our skies for decades, further fueling the overall warming, not mitigating it, short-term toxic surface cooldowns at the cost of an even worse long-term warming, destroyed ozone layer, which is by itself an extremely near-term existential threat, completely disrupting the hydrological cycle, ubiquitously contaminating the entire planet and every breath we take. So, to the authors of this CNN report, is that your idea of a cure? The CNN report goes on to say this: Florida's legislature is moving along a bill that would ban geoengineering that just cleared its third hurdle, I believe, on Thursday. And weather modification in that state, the state of Alabama, also discussing a similar bill. Tennessee lawmakers passed this last year. Again, 31 states as of the end of this week. But the authors of this CNN report state that the release of airborne chemicals is, quote, nonsense, according to critics. They say, well, there you have it. The power structure paid critics called climate engineering total nonsense, so it can't be real, right? Don't believe what you see in our skies with your lying eyes. Final excerpt from the CNN report, though debunked many times over the years, chemtrail believers say the white, and notice they use that term all the time, chemtrail. If you want to move this fight forward, don't use that word in anything other than private conversation. Stick to the science terms. We're playing chess. We need to learn how to play well. It's not a matter of pride. For people, for some it is. They want to use whatever word they want to use, even if it's counterproductive to the cause. Learn how to play chess well. Be in this fight to win it. Use the science terms unless you're in private personal conversations. The CNN report says chemtrail believers say the white condensation lines left behind by airplanes in the sky are filled with toxic chemicals. No, we're not saying that or guessing about that. Geoengineeringwatch.org, at our expense, over six figures, took a NOAA flying lab, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration flying lab, to altitude, top scientists in it, all on film, all on the record, sampled what these heavy aircraft were emitting, processed that at Rensselaer Polytechnic in New York, a world-renowned lab, and we found exactly what we knew we would find: toxic climate engineering elements, starting with aluminum nanoparticles. So where does that leave a report like this? It's a blatant, glaring lie of cover-up. CNN continues, quote, but the theory has remanifested itself in a resurgence over controversy around scientists' effort for weather modification and geoengineering. And those who believe in the conspiracy now have a platform from the head of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. We know what they're speaking about there, don't we? Robert Kennedy. More from the CNN report. In an ex-post last Sunday, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. claimed that as states move to ban geoengineering our climate by dousing our citizens, our waterways, and our landscapes with toxins, this is a movement every MAHA activist needs to support. HHS will do its part, end quote. Again, that's from Kennedy. For those that don't know, the MAHA acronym refers to the Make America Healthy Again movement under Robert Kennedy. CNN goes on. Robert Kennedy, sadly, they say, has fallen into this particular trap. And that was a quote by climate economist Gernot Wagner. That's what he told to CNN. For the record, Gernot Wagner is one of the faces of geoengineering disinformation. Search geoengineeringwatch.org, the faces of climate engineering disinformation, I believe is the name of our report. Gernot Wagner is featured in that report, along with Dr. Douglas McMartin, whom geoengineeringwatch.org sued at our expense. And though the system sided with him, holding McMartin not responsible for anything he did, including being the cause of Facebook's unjust censoring of the Dimming documentary, Bloomberg News still covered my legal action against McMartin. Look it up for yourself. It's easy to find online. McMartin and his friends didn't like the publicity, as I believe they know somewhere down deep that once the public is fully awakened to the climate engineering crimes and the so-called experts that contributed to the criminal cover-up of those crimes, said experts will have much explaining to do for a justifiably outraged population. We'll soon enough find out. Finishing up with this CNN report, they say weather modification is a real thing. Cloud seeding to help rain develop in dry areas is one of the most common examples. Let's stop there again. The whole premise of seeding anything, modifying the weather in any way, shape, or form, when you cause rain to fall in one place, it obviously didn't make it wherever it was going. So, thus, there is no benign form of weather modification, anything. And to compare the publicized weather modification operations, single engine propeller driven airplane with a few flares on the wings, to climate intervention operations, which is military tankers, some can carry up to 100 tons of material in a single payload in the case of one KC-135. Comparing weather modification to climate engineering operations is like comparing an ant to an elephant. It's important to know the difference. Both are bad, yes, but it is a matter of scale. CNN then states these bills also target geoengineering, a field still in its infancy. What absolute total nonsense. Geoengineering operations were first fully deployed in 1945 based on all available data. CNN says in which scientists are theorizing ways to counteract the fast-paced warming effects of carbon fuel pollution. We live in an absolute asylum. I wake up every day and that's all that's on my mind. It's impossible to comprehend the totality of the insanity on every front. CNN states the chemtrail conspiracy theory was around long before social media, likely originating in the mid-1990s, possibly earlier, and when extreme weather happens, discourse on those conspiracy theories tend to spike, Wagner told CNN. These people are absolute contributors to a criminal cover-up. When will they be held accountable legally and morally? CNN says some people, notably Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Georgia Republican, believe the federal government used non-existent weather manipulation technology. Non-existent based on whose opinion? Are we talking about facts here? Or the statement from a CNN reporter who's also part of the criminal cover-up? Listed their names earlier. Again, perhaps peaceful professional messages with a link to the dimming is appropriate to send to them and every other article like this. They say this non-existent weather manipulation technology to create a hurricane and push it toward certain regions. About hurricane manipulation, the spawning of such a storm is a different subject. What we can prove is the manipulation of that storm. It's important to know the details. Final excerpt from CNN. The discourse prompted the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to release a fact check titled Debunking Weather Modification Claims. No one creates or steers hurricanes. The technology does not exist because they say so. Never mind that it existed in 1947, but it doesn't exist now. That sounds a little like we had the technology to go to the moon in the 60s, including with an EV dune buggy to recreate around the moon, but we can't go back because we lost the technology. We don't have films of certain parts of those landings because, quote from NASA, the film reels were expensive and no one was watching them, so we just taped over them. This is mind-numbing. How big do the lies have to be? Steel structure high-rise buildings fall down by themselves if some furniture is burning on the first story, in the case of Building 7, World Trade Tower. When will populations, especially in first world nations that could still make a difference at this late hour, when will they face reality? When we hit the concrete wall at full velocity, which we are perilously close to doing? And those who don't believe it, you will soon, very soon. Wait and see. Let's flash back to 2013 from NBCnews.com. CIA said to back study on ways to hack the global climate. The U.S. intelligence community is helping to fund a study that is evaluating ways to cool the globe and climate, including proposals to pump the skies full of sunlight-reflecting particles. Asylum. Planetary Truman Show, controlled by cancerous criminal cabals, those who print the money from thin air. Stop and think about how absurd all this denial is when we can look at one single film clip, the beginning of every single week of this broadcast, Global Alert News. President Lyndon Johnson, then Vice President, again, 63 years ago now, emphatically stating on the record, we had the power to control the world's cloud layer then, and he who controls the weather controls the world. And now we have, even now, nothing but denial from the so-called experts, from so-called media, from so-called elected officials, of which there are a few exceptions, and I'm very grateful for them, and they know who they are. I'm certainly not directing my angst toward them, but toward every other so-called elected official clown, every prop in this play that's doing their part for the Matrix because it provides them a paycheck, a pension, and what they feel is a membership in the club. You can decide for yourself what that means. Moving on, biosphere collapse has beat the power structure to the intersection, so to speak. And as I've warned about it on this broadcast and at geoengineeringwatch.org for over a decade and a half, that at this juncture, the power structure becomes more desperate and dangerous than ever. What I have warned about for 15 years is that we can expect false flags, pathogen releases, and orchestrated global conflict. Welcome to the future, which is now. From thesun.com, on that note, ready for war. EU to order all citizens to ready World War III survival kits as NATO warns Putin faces devastating revenge if he attacks Europe. Really? 72 hours of provisions is going to make everything okay? And what happens for the rest of forever? This is mind-numbing that anybody could think this is actual preparation for the end of the world on the current course. Yes, stupid humans. Let's all continue to wage wars, using up the last remaining resources of the planet and destroying the planet's last remaining life support systems in the process. What a great idea. And for those that don't yet realize it, conflicts all over the world are ultimately orchestrated in one form or another by the rulers from behind the curtain. And if you think the criminally insane wouldn't destroy the planet in spite of themselves, think again. Final excerpt from this Ready for War report from thesun.com. Quote, if anyone were to miscalculate and think they can get away with an attack on Poland or any other ally, they will be met with the full force of this fierce alliance. They're talking about NATO, of course. They then say, quote, our reaction will be devastating. Yes, devastating is the right term. And the outcome applies to every single passenger on planet Earth. Any form of nuclear conflict at any scale, game over. The ionizing radiation will strip away what little is left of the ozone layer. Done. No more food, no more plankton, no more fish, dead oceans, mass methane release from the thawing methane hydrate and clathrate deposits around the globe. Done. Venus syndrome. And people are going about their lives as if we're not hurtling to the bottom of the canyon. Back to weather warfare, the devastated web of life, and the rest of our now broken planet. First on weather warfare from AccuWeather, over a dozen states brace for widespread severe weather tornado threats this weekend. Mother Nature, they say, and they use that word so often because they just want to program every member of the population they can with thinking this is something natural when it's anything but. The report states Mother Nature will squeeze in one more large storm. It even sounds scheduled, doesn't it? How do they know what's going to take place over the coming months? One more large storm over the central United States this weekend. That storm is destined to bring severe weather, snow, and wildfire spreading winds. That certainly all usually goes together, right? Do we see historical events of wildfires and snow in the same storm, warm side of the winter storm and the cold side? They say the storm's southwestern corridor, another round of strong wind gust is capable of kicking up dust and increasing the wildfire risk. That may occur this weekend. This would be over portions of the southern high plains where rain from the storm Thursday and Friday, as well as any rain from the new storm Saturday, doesn't reach. Further north, the report says on the storm's northern flank, like several other similar storms this month, a swath of snow and wintry mix will occur. What's going on here? Plumes of moisture from the record-warm Gulf are manipulated northward. They're chemically nucleated along the way. They're spun around a manipulated low-pressure zone that spins counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. And on the wrapped-around side of that, as the chemical ice nucleation process continues, we have, quote, rain changing over to snow. Elevation doesn't matter anymore because now you're on the, quote, cold side of the, quote, winter storm as opposed to the warm side of the winter storm. Welcome to the asylum. I want to take a moment to ask a question of all the so-called environmental organizations, Greenpeace, Sierra Club, WWF, all of them. Where are you in this fight? How criminal can your hypocrisy be? None of these organizations deserve a cent unless or until they address the climate engineering elephant in this equation. And we know why they're not, because in the past, geoengineeringwatch.org attorneys have communicated with attorneys from all the major environmental groups, and we're told that they will not address climate engineering because they don't want to lose their 501c3 nonprofits. Criminal hypocrisy from environmental organizations across the board. Don't give them a cent. They don't deserve it. From NBC, Marine Center in crisis mode after sea lions and dolphins left stranded on LA beaches. From that report, there is a growing crisis along the LA County coast. This is just getting worse. This has happened before, but it's way worse now. The totality of die-off will be complete soon. As sea lions and dolphins are getting sick due to toxic algae blooms, that's what we're told Are there toxic algae blooms? Yes. Is there much more in the equation? Yes. How about the 500,000 barrels of DDT that we now know was dumped off of LA beaches? 500,000 barrels. Look it up. Don't believe me. No one talks about that. They can say whatever they want, and the public generally gulps it down because they don't want to believe how horrific this equation really is. And that dump site off the LA beaches was only one of 18 that are now known off the U.S. West Coast. Business as usual. Loot, plunder, pillage, and pollute until absolutely nothing is left. This report says sea lions can be heard barking off the San Pedro coast as the number of sick mammals stranded on LA beaches continues to rise, again, due to they want you to believe this toxic algae bloom alone as if that's the only problem here. It's not. There's also the intense UV radiation from climate engineering destroying the ozone layer, which is killing plankton, which is killing the food chain, which means these seals have nothing to eat. What they do eat is highly toxic. No wonder they're dying. And this absolutely breaks my heart because I've spent so many years diving face to face with these miraculous creatures. What's wrong with our species? What's wrong with so many people? For those of us that are awake and aware of family and friends that are going about their lives as if nothing is wrong, and if you try to bring the truth up to them, they ram their heads in the sand as far as they can. Good luck with that, because those heads are going to be ripped out of the sand soon by unfolding events. Wait and see. Final statement from this report: sea lions are not the only animals being affected. Beginning last week, dolphins have also washed ashore from Long Beach to Malibu coasts. No wonder. Let's add this from discernreport.com. Honey bee deaths devastate U.S. agriculture. This is record honeybee deaths. Pesticides under scrutiny. That's part of the problem. So are frequency transmissions. But what about the peer-reviewed reports proving that bees are dying of massive aluminum exposure? They can't even find their way back to the hives. They have symptoms that resemble Alzheimer's and dementia in a human being, and this is happening thousands of miles away from farms or infrastructure. Obviously, there's a ubiquitous source of contamination. Look up aluminum nanoparticles, primary element in climate engineering, everything. It's in every drop of precipitation that we have tested over many years. Aluminum toxic to all life forms, period, no exception. Back to the report on honeybee die-off. U.S. beekeepers report record honeybee deaths with over 60% colony losses this winter, the worst in history. Let's put that into perspective. That's 60% lost this winter of a die-off of already about 80%. So that leaves about 5% left in some regions. People don't understand just how dire our situation is and how immediate. The report says scientists warn of cascading agricultural impacts, including higher costs and lower yields for key crops. Let's correct that conclusion. If we remain on the current course of cascading climate and ecological collapse, there won't be lower crop yields. There won't be yields. Food shelves will empty out, even in first world nations. Mad Max on steroids then begins. On that upbeat note, you're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 503, March 29th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is aired on numerous AM and FM stations around the country. If any radio station near you is willing to air the Global Alert News broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We will grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary The Dimming, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Best way to share: circulate the direct link to The Dimming by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship. When viewing our YouTube of The Dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube, please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience about reaching those that still aren't looking up. Here's one way. Again, start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials. They can be found on our homepage. Our only goal: provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. We pass on our extremely high quality printed full color materials for less than our cost of producing and shipping. We now have new Geoengineering Watch hoodies to go with our Geoengineering Watch shirts. Photos of both are on our homepage. We have scannable business cards and bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Again, reaching a critical mass of awareness, only way forward in this fight. It is the great imperative of our time. As we awaken our military brothers and sisters to what they're participating in, their own demise and ours, we hope, we pray that they stand down and stop participating in what amounts to self-extermination. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, ideally in some crowded location, please send your photos to us so that we can post it as part of our activist compilation, which is now part of our materials page. The images encourage others to make their voices heard in this all-important battle to sound the alarm. Final note on this message to all those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering onslaught, my deepest gratitude to you forever and ever. Moving on from counterpunch.com, discovery of immense methane leaks in Antarctica. This is an ongoing story that's getting worse by the day. No, it's not the cow flatulence that's the problem. It's the thawing and releasing methane hydrate and clathrate deposits that literally holds Earth in the balance at this point. Climate engineering, the attempt to hide what's happening, is making it worse, not better. Far worse. From the report, a new discovery of methane leaks in Antarctica could be a game changer and potential near-term threat that's difficult to characterize without sounding overly negative. This is all from the report. It continues, situations like this that appear threatening to civilization or life as we know it are difficult to believe and accept as something that will really happen, which is understandable, the report states, because nothing in human history compares to the risk attendant to the dreaded runaway greenhouse effect, aka Venus syndrome. Not a metaphor. Search geoengineeringwatch.org Venus syndrome. I've been trying to warn about this for a decade and a half. The report continues. Russian scientists working in the Arctic believe a huge pulse of methane could erupt. This could crank up global temperatures to ultra-dangerous levels in as little as 2 to 3 years. The consequences, the report states, would be unspeakable. And with Antarctica joining this scenario, the game changes further. The report then states the findings have sent ripples of concern throughout the world of science. The volume of methane locked away in Antarctica is estimated to be more carbon than all other fuel deposits combined for the planet. Went over part of this in a previous broadcast. A small fraction of this escaping into the atmosphere could have catastrophic consequences for the climate system. Let's stop there. Not could, not may, not might. There's no question. If this happens, we're done. Climate engineering making it worse, not better, in the attempt to hide it from populations by engineering snowstorms in places like New Orleans and Florida. The weather terrorists are trying to distract populations from what's happening around the rest of the world. The report then says methane hydrates consist of methane molecules trapped within a crystalline lattice of water molecules. This forms an ice substance that can ignite if brought to the surface and lit with a match. Release of methane from these hydrates is a frightening prospect. That's an understatement. Again, such a release could trigger a runaway greenhouse effect, leading to rapid and catastrophic climate change. Rapid onset of methane would bring sea levels rising at unprecedented rates, extreme weather events more frequently, and widespread disruption/destruction to global ecosystems. Translation: collapse of everything everywhere all at once. The researchers have now reported the discovery of large methane leaks on the seafloor, talking about Antarctica again. The runaway greenhouse gas effect can destroy a planet's habitability. That's the final statement from this report. Well, there you have it. Finally, an acknowledgement, again, of exactly the warnings from geoengineeringwatch.org over a decade and a half of warnings. I've tried to sound the alarm on this at the top of my lungs. Question, why did the rest of the science community take so long to catch up? And what will it take for them to tell the truth about the climate engineering elephant in the equation, which is ensuring that this scenario will in fact happen? Moving on, dead oceans. Scientifically speaking, the scenario we're hurtling towards is termed Canfield Ocean. lifeless, stratified, oxygenless, dead zones. Oceans die, we die. Simple. Cascading collapse from every conceivable direction is taking place. From the UK Guardian, Australian reefs hit by profoundly distressing simultaneous coral bleaching events, talking about the Great Barrier Reef and the Ningaloo Reef. It's on the west coast. This report states scientists say widespread damage to both World Heritage listed reefs is, quote, heartbreaking as the Western Australian Reef accumulates highest amount of heat stress on record. Teams of scientists on both coasts have been monitoring and tracking the heat stress and bleaching extended across thousands of kilometers of marine habitat. It's imploding. Again, so many in total denial of what's occurring, including the climate science community. It's still pretending that this is something that can be stopped at this point. This is the Thelma and Louise moment. Human race, occupants of the car, like Thelma and Louise, blasting through the guardrail, sailing through the air, headed toward the bottom of the canyon. How obvious can that be at this point? And yes, it's a very difficult pill to swallow, but turning your back to this scenario will not save us. Hiding in your cabin on the Titanic won't save you. We all need to be on deck, sounding the alarm, bringing these programs to light and to a halt, including all the rest of the destruction from industrialized, militarized society and the military-industrial complex, all of which is a recipe for near-term self-annihilation. We're about to find out the hard way how true that is. Let me take a time out for a moment. If and when anyone says to you, the planet's fine, and that conclusions to the contrary are just, quote, alarmism, ask them what planet they live on, because it isn't this one. If everything I've described in this broadcast and 502 others before it, and countless independent broadcasts with other platforms, isn't cause for alarm, what the hell is? Look up. If that isn't cause for alarm, then your eyes are wide shut. And unfortunately, that applies to far too many. And for those whose eyes are wide open and who are dedicating themselves to doing whatever they can, given their individual circumstances and situation at this late hour, you have my undying gratitude. And we march together in this battle, each of us spokes in the wheel, all of us necessary to make it turn. Team effort. Moving on from phys.org. Climate warming and heat waves are accelerating global lake deoxygenization, study finds. It's happening in freshwater bodies as well. And I can certainly verify this in my wilderness location of Northern California that once had beautiful native trout in streams that originate on my habitat preserve, and they are all gone. They are all dead. The waters have deoxygenated, algae builds up all year long now, dead, gone, done. How fast is the heat building up? Been over this before. When I started my broadcast over 10 years ago, the thermal energy buildup on planet Earth was equivalent to about 4 Hiroshima-sized nuclear bombs per second. No, I didn't misspeak. 4 per second. Now it's at about 13. How long does anyone think this can continue? And it's not just climate engineering. Too many people want to pretend that climate engineering is our only problem. That couldn't be further from the truth. They want to pretend that burning hydrocarbons is a wonderful thing, the more the better. From a scientific standpoint, from a reasonable standpoint, from a rational standpoint, that is obviously ludicrous. If the planet was thriving before the carbon count went up by 50%, completely altering atmospheric chemistry, and now it's dying, how can anyone pretend we need more carbon? What a moronic conclusion that is. And I have no love for Al Gore or any of the environmental groups, but I'm not going to abandon my sense of reason. We're going through 100 million barrels plus of hydrocarbon a day, 26 million tons of coal a day. We're cutting down the forest, we're poisoning the ocean, we're paving the planet. And on top of that, we have the climate engineering insanity. How long does anyone think we're going to be here on the current course? We're about to hit the wall at full velocity. If you're going to make a difference, now is the time, or we won't have tomorrow. More headlines. Yes, meltdown is here. Climate engineering is, again, further fueling it overall, along with completely contaminating the entire planet and every breath we take. From the New York Times, Phoenix reaches 99 degrees, shattering a heat record. From AccuWeather, South Korea fights deadly wildfires in southeast as thousands evacuate. Wonder what South Korea did to make the controllers angry. Next headline, this is from UK Guardian. South Korean wildfires become biggest on record as disaster chief points to harsh reality. What are we watching on TV? Political theater every day. No one has a clue that all hell is breaking loose all over the world. From the Pinnacle Gazette, drought leads to more than 80 wildfires in the Netherlands. When did you hear about the Netherlands having a plague of wildfires? From extremetemps.com, historic warmth in the Netherlands, hottest March night in Netherlands history. From the UK Independent, wildfires in western Japan. Ongoing story there. Damaged homes force residents to evacuate. From extremetemps.com, again, historic heat in Australia. Another from extremetemps.com, absolute madness in China. 107 degrees in March, 535 records pulverized, hundreds more of the highest nighttime minimum temperatures also broken. Report goes on to say, quote, the most extreme weather event in world climatic history, which started 4 weeks ago between Europe and Africa, is now in East Asia. They're talking about heat, which far too many Americans pay no attention to because they're in the most chemically cooled country on planet Earth. Moving on, Carolinas still being punished by the controllers and the weather makers. From the UK Independent, evacuation orders across North Carolina as wildfires burn uncontained. I believe South Carolina now having the same problem. On the flip side of the climate engineering coin, devastating deluge. From MSN, worst flood in 100 years just hit South America. Do we hear anything about that in Matrix Media? No, nothing. From the worldweather.org, consecutive extreme heat and flooding events in Argentina highlight the risk of managing increasingly frequent and intense hazards in a warming climate. Climate engineering core to all of these equations, inseparable from all these equations. From The Guardian, U.S. rejects Mexico's request for water as administration opens new battlefront. Water wars just beginning all over the globe. Why is it raining less on a warming planet? Climate engineering. The factor we're not being told about. It can't rain less overall on a warming planet unless there's a factor we're not being told about. Again, that's climate engineering. The atmosphere holds 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. The laws of physics haven't changed. Climate engineering, again, core. From thejournal.com, Southern Colorado's dismal snowpack has water managers worried. Much of that, quote, snow, the chemically nucleated kind, sublimates, which means it reverts from a solid to a gas, much of it bypassing the liquid phase. Doesn't behave like a naturally nucleated frozen material. From MSN, scientists alarmed by new normal observed on slopes of Mount Everest. This is a wake-up call. Melting. Don't have time to go into this article. But they do state in this article that it's suspected that much of the snow's disappearance is due to, what? Sublimation, not melting. Why is this? I just said why. Chemically nucleated element tends to sublimate. And these scientists can't figure it out? We know what's happening at Geoengineering.org and have tried to sound the alarm for a decade and a half, and they can't figure it out. From ABC News, Arctic sea ice hits record low for its usual peak growth period. This is very grave indeed. We're heading toward a BOE, Blue Ocean event. Everything goes exponential then. No, there's not record sea ice, as some continue to try to claim, flying in the face of reality. There's record low sea ice around the globe. From newscientist.com, global sea ice just hit a new record low as well. The consequences of what's unfolding cannot be overstated. The planet's air conditioners are broken. And still we have people claiming there's a coming ice age. What planet are they on? They're living in some alternate reality. But hey, just crank the air conditioner up. No problem, right? On that note, from IEA, International Energy Agency, growth in global energy demand surged in 2024 to almost twice its recent average. Think about that. How long does anyone think that can continue? Final headline for this broadcast from theexpress.com. We are in the middle of a climate apocalypse, but do we really care? Question mark. From that report, the problem with the soft apocalypse is that it is still an apocalypse. It still ends in collapse. We tell ourselves we have time, that the worst is always just ahead, that we'll act when we must. Oops, too late. How many have taken notice that in most post-apocalyptic movies, there's still some level of functional environment, trees, animals, the basics for life and survival. But again, as already stated, if we remain on the current course far sooner than almost any dare to imagine, our once thriving planet will be a lifeless ball of rock spinning in the vast expanse of space, a true sister planet to Venus. Can we still alter our current trajectory? How can we ever know unless we try with every fiber of our being? And if we don't, how can we face ourselves in the mirror or look our children in the eyes? True and unshakable inner peace cannot be dependent on any external thing. We must never, ever forget that. We, each of us, all of us, must decide why we are here at this greatest of all crossroads in the journey and fate of the human race, indeed of all life on earth, what's left of it. What greater calling could we be given than to commit every fiber of our being to standing against the gathering tide of total insanity, dedicating every fiber of our being to saving and salvaging what is yet left of the planet's remaining life support systems, to know at your core that you faced the gathering storm head on without yielding? What life could be better lived than such a life? No matter how dark the horizon, we can yet make a difference, but the effort will take all of us. Every single day counts. Check the activist suggestions link on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org for specific instructions on how you can help to move this fight forward. Please make your voice heard while it can still make a difference. We are not alone in this battle. Never give up, ever. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.